Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Gloria Blackwell, CEO of AAUW, and I'm so glad you could join us today for our webinar regarding the future of higher education. Before we begin our discussion, I just want to lift up that this program is being recorded and it will be available at our AAUW.org website and on our YouTube page. Also, you can certainly drop any tech issues that you have in the chat. And I also wanted to note that we do have a robust set of questions. If time permits, we may get to any incoming questions. So to begin, at AAUW, we believe higher education is one of the most powerful vehicles for expanding opportunity, especially for women pursuing degrees in fields where they have long been underrepresented. We also know access to higher education and the ability to afford it are not experienced equally. Who gets access, who feels they belong, and who is supported to complete a degree, and who benefits from the outcomes of that degree are all deeply shaped by gender, race, class, and policy choices. So when we talk about the future of higher education, we're not just talking about institutions, we're talking about equity, economic security, and who gets to thrive. In this pivotal moment, colleges, universities, and students are navigating real pressures. Shifts in enforcement and protections can change what students can rely on when they face discrimination, harassment, or retaliation, and whether they feel safe enough to stay enrolled. Also, political efforts to control curriculum, research, or hiring can create a real chill for faculty and students, narrowing what gets taught, studied, or even discussed. More people are questioning the value of higher education, and there's growing pressure to judge colleges solely by short-term outcomes. And there are efforts underway to tighten federal student loan options and set new borrowing caps. This is not just a technical shift, it's an access question. Who can still start, stay, and finish a degree without being pushed out? For more than 140 years, generations of AAUW women have organized, advocated, and persevered to expand opportunity in education, in the workforce, and in economic security, with a primary focus on equity. We focus on who benefits from higher education and who is pushed to the margins. We invest in potential, in brilliant women who use education to change their lives and in turn change the world. Today's conversation is designed to be practical and honest. We're asking, what's changing in higher education? What's here to stay? How are those shifts already affecting women and others who have historically been excluded? And how we as educators, leaders, advocates, and community members can act now to mitigate harm and advance equity for women in the future. We have two extraordinary panelists with us today, scholars and leaders who are also AAUW Fellowship alumni. They bring perspectives that span institutional leadership, feminist research, activism, and the realities of navigating change in higher education. So here's what I hope you'll take away by the end of our hour together: a clearer sense of the forces shaping higher education, a few examples of what's advancing higher education, and most importantly, concrete actions that you can apply in your own context, whether you're leading on a campus, supporting students, shaping policy, or building community around these issues. So let's get the conversation started with our two dynamic leaders and AUW alumni who are joining us today. First, I'd like to introduce Dr. Toby Jenkins, who was a 2011-12 recipient of our AAUW American Postdoctoral Research Fellowship. Dr. Jenkins is a professor of higher education, leadership, and policy, and has served in several leadership positions at the University of South Carolina, including Associate Provost for Faculty Development and Associate Dean of the Graduate School. She's also worked at the University of Maryland, Penn State, George Mason University, Georgia Southern University, and the University of Hawaii, and is considered a national expert on inclusive leadership and inclusive excellence with 25 years of experience in higher education. Welcome, Dr. Jenkins. And next, Dr. Kimala Price, a recipient of our 2009-2010 AAUW American Postdoctoral Research Fellowship. She is a professor and chair of Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies and co-director of the Bread and Roses Center for Feminist Research and Activism at San Diego State University. Prior to her position at SDSU, she was a postdoctoral research fellow at IBIS Reproductive Health, an independent research center based in Cambridge, Massachusetts. In addition to her research and scholarship on reproductive health policy and politics, she has a strong commitment to feminist activism and policy advocacy, and for more than 3 decades, Dr. Price has been active in the reproductive rights and reproductive justice movements in Washington, D.C. and in Atlanta. Thank you both for being here. We are honored to have your voices in this critical discussion. I also want to note that we want to engage you, our audience, in this conversation as well. And I encourage you to use the chat to consider these questions that are going to be dropped in there and share your responses. The first one is, what do you see as the biggest shift in higher education within the next 3 to 5 years? And what does that shift mean for women and others facing systemic barriers? And the second one is, what early signals are you seeing on your campus or even in your community that suggest where higher education might be or is headed, particularly around equity and access? So let's get the conversation started. So to start off, Kim and Toby, I have a question for both of you. What are the most significant shifts underway in higher education right now, and how are they changing access, affordability, and student outcomes? I'll start with you, Toby.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the invitation and opportunity to engage with the AAUW community. It's a space and a community that's dear to my heart, so always good to be here. Um, I think there are several different shifts, and we'll probably get more deeper into some of these issues later. Definitely the question about the worth and benefit of higher education is huge. It's causing a shift in how we promote our institutions, how we educate the public on, even the types of conversations that we have about what we're doing and what we produce and what the benefits are. I think also a pressure to align those with political priorities or societal priorities when we might, have historically held value for the broad range of benefits that higher education holds that might not just be about workforce. So I think there's a pressure to kind of solely focus on workforce outcomes when we know higher education benefits people more broadly and deeply from participation. I think shrinking budgets and redistributed resources are continue to be a challenge. Resources have always been a challenge, but now to see some spaces on campus and functions on campus that were already have always struggled, now being completely diminished as far as human and financial resources is an issue. And I also think we have a different type of student, coming. We always have shifts in student populations and generations and everything. But just as current political climates impact us. Can you imagine being, reared and growing and developing as a human being, or as a child in this type of environment? And so it absolutely has impacted them and affected them and their expectations of college, their beliefs about what type of experiences they should have. And I think in some ways just the ways that they approach um, education and educators is different. So I'll pause because I mean we could go on, but I want to give space to my colleague.
Excellent. Thank you. So many key issues. How about you, Kim? What are your thoughts?
Toby has hit a lot of those points. But first of all, also thank you for having me here. AAUW's Dear Tomorrow Heart, I feel like it's been one of the key reasons for my success in academia. Um, so I want to put that out there, but I think Toby hit it on the head in terms of a lot of things that are happening right now. I mean, the key issues are political issues that are happening and economic forces, right?
Mhm.
We're seeing, we're struggling in terms of the economy overall in our country, and prices are becoming inflated in terms of, we talk about in terms of groceries and foods, but also the cost of education is getting higher, right? And people are starting to question the value of a college degree if, they end up having to spend, $200,000 for a 4-year degree, right? Even at like a public university. And so they're starting to wonder what is the return on investment, which is something that colleges and universities are looking at because they're getting those external pressures in terms of are students going to get a high financial payout at the end once they finish a 4-year degree? Are they going to get a job that's not only going to pay off their loan, but also help them have a stable economic future where they're living a middle class or up um, um, lifestyle or what have you? But also, the elephant in the room is we are living in a very hostile political climate. um, Far-right Republicans, including in the White House as well as in Congress and in various state legislatures who are very hostile to education, particularly higher education. They don't, they sort of argued in terms of return on investment, but they also argued it in terms of the content of what people are actually learning, but also whether or not certain majors are even important enough to continue to have, like particularly those in the humanities and the social sciences. And so encouraging people to move in other directions, which in my case, I think a lot of it might have to do with what's being taught in those classes. Don't particularly like so you start to see these attacks on the curriculum and what's being taught and what particular topics are being taught, whether we're talking about sort of gender equity issues, are we talking about the rights for queer and trans people, the rights of people of color, talking about that history. So that's also kind of part of the mix as well, because it doesn't sort of fit the narrative of a lot of people who believe that the country has gone on the wrong side and that they
Mhm.
need to sort of recalibrate the social and political landscape, right? And so I kind of stopped there because I think we're probably going to get more into this in this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you, Kim. And thank you both of you for lifting up, all of these key issues that we'll get into, dig into a little bit more deeply as we move forward. But obviously the impact has been incredible already, and it spreads across the higher education space. So thank you. So let's spend a bit of time. I'll spend with you individually, asking a few questions. I'm going to start out with you, Toby. So as a former associate provost for faculty development, you really led faculty through a period of real political and policy uncertainty. So I wonder if you can share an example of how values-driven leadership could help faculty continue supporting students, even when external pressures make the work more challenging.
Right, right. Well, um, I think I want to approach the question from a personal lens. rather than maybe an administrative or political strategy, type of approach. And I think I want to talk directly to faculty and not necessarily university leaders and how they can support and everything. So and when I reflect on myself as a faculty member, I enter my work culture first. And so what I mean by that is that my steps are guided by my cultural history. Right? I'm a daughter of the Black South. I was born and raised in South Carolina. I'm a global citizen of the world, studied and worked in over 50 countries or whatever. And so for me as a professional, remembering my cultural history reminds me of what I'm made of. It reminds me of who I am, and to who I truly belong, right? Because you do not belong to your job. You belong to your people, whatever people matter, whoever those people are that matter to you. You belong to like your spiritual guide, whatever name that energy holds on your tongue. You belong to your life purpose. And these things are bigger than your current position or your current institution. And we really need to, particularly in time like this, be committed to what truly matters in our broader lives and not being distracted by the trends and the fear and the scare, of the moment, right? And I think it's easy to forget this with everything going on because there's been so much going on. We talked about it just now, but I mean, we're exhausted. We're exhausted. Many of us are afraid, and rightfully frustrated, because so many things are coming at us. And I think what's been really strategic this year is they're coming at us in all these different directions. Like you can't even get a hold on one thing because it's something else is coming at you from a different direction. But it's trying to make us scared and slow and cautious rather than bold and brave and creative. And I just want to honor that first because that reality, because we're human and people are having a really human response to this. We aren't robots or warriors. We aren't soldiers, right? Right. We pour love into people. We build lives, and we didn't come into this career to defend or fight. Um, so, I don't know. I feel like these external pressures are causing many of us to run wild, feeling angry and disappointed, in an environment that really should be the epitome of possibility and hope. It should be a beautiful environment, but things are out of whack. And I talked about how I enter culture first. Well, I'm from South Carolina. My mother was a gardener, and she planted beautiful gardens. I mean, her collard greens were like a work of art, you know. And one of the things she taught me was that when a plant gets out of hand, right? When it gets to be too much, when it's in danger of dying, you cut it back to its original state so that it can bloom again. And I really think that just from a personal stance, many of us need to tend to our roots. We need to remember who we were born to be and the legacy that we come from. Right. So I lean on my cultural history, the values that were taught to me by my parents and grandparents and aunties and elders. Because when I think about those previous generations like my parents and civil rights generation and the generations before that, despite all they endured, nothing stopped them from loving their children. Nothing stopped teachers from teaching their students, right? So I don't know. I've been really centering the word momentum lately. And I gave a keynote a couple of years ago, and the theme of the conference was moving the momentum of the willing, and that really stuck with me because momentum is simply about moving, not standing still, and understanding that the smallest movement can still make impact. And we see this all the time in places like sports. So like my son's 11 and he plays basketball. And so there's always a moment in these games where little bit of momentum changes everything, right? So you block a shot with seconds left in the game, and now anything is possible. Now we have a chance to win when just 30 seconds ago we thought it was all over, right? Um, and so the thing is that one moment, it doesn't have to be anything spectacular. All right. It might not be that ESPN jumping 5 feet and doing one of those get out of here kind of blocks or whatever. It could just simply be standing in front of your opponent, putting your hands in the air and waving them and messing up their shot, right? Just simple and fundamental, but it always works. Um, and I was thinking about this the past few weeks. We've all been captivated with the monks walking for peace, and they just left South Carolina, and they did something very simple. 20 people started walking. It wasn't a huge, loud protest. It was a big social media campaign. It wasn't some major movement. It was just 20 people walking in silence. And now they have millions of people voluntarily coming along with them. They didn't create that social media frenzy. We did it for them. They didn't say anything. We did it for them. And so the fact that they had such a, I don't know, a massive kind of public walk in a state like South Carolina, right? Because we've been the biggest walk that they've had so far. That's a lesson in real power. Just move how your spirit and soul tells you to move. Right? That's value-driven leadership to me. You don't need permission to love students and to support them. We've been doing that years ago, even when our institutions weren't supporting us. When our institutions were against much of the work that we were doing, we were still doing it. So I'm just saying, moving the momentum of the willing, because we still have some momentum. We still have students who want the type of deep learning that we want to give. Many students still want that connection, that personal connection with advisors or mentors to help them navigate college. No policy that limits your curriculum can limit your relationships. And we need to remember that we can still build these really strong relationships with students. So, for years, faculty have always had these deep, meaningful conversations with small groups of students, intimate conversations at coffee shops, or having them over to their houses, or groups kind of meeting and talking on the lawn. But they were small gatherings, but those gatherings birthed like real change agents. A lot of the scholars that we study now had those type of powerful college experiences. So I say, we can go back to the basics. What we can do, that's what we can do, is talk and gather and help, advise, teach those who want to learn, who want to have these types of experiences. But, to me, human connection and conversation is timeless. We can still be the educators we were called to be, but it pulls us back to our roots. And to me, that's what value-driven leadership is. It's about remembering who you are. And if you're a caring person, go ahead and care about students. And do it with the willing, the people that want what you're wanting to give.
Thank you. I think it's really important because you lifted up, this current time, right, when some people are questioning the value of higher education and, the leadership moves that are really important that really reaffirm why colleges and universities matter, right? Especially for women and students who have been historically excluded. But also, how should institutions rethink faculty development, evaluation, and sort of reward structures so the work of inclusive teaching, mentoring, and equity building is recognized sort of and resourced and not treated as that extra labor?
Right, 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 right. Um, so is this is such an interesting question, because I think this has been an issue that was a challenge even before this political stuff, right? I think faculty development is often the thing that's not cared for because we're so focused on so many other things. But from a leadership perspective, I don't know. I think it's crucial to understand that we need to devote equal time to building better relationships with everyone, students and employees. You're right, because there are many people who live on a college campus. I've spent my life on a college campus. I feel a part of that community as well. Um, and so we have to nourish everyone because they aren't going to be, faculty and staff can't be vibrant and energetic and brilliant and dedicated if they're struggling, right? It's almost like that directive they give you on the plane when, put your mask on before you you help someone else. But that's real. Like you can't help someone else when you're struggling to survive. And that's how a lot of people feel right now. So I don't know. I feel like professionals, a lot of people have had it. They want more out of life. And this has been motivated lately with the frustration, but also a lot of it started in pandemic. People reevaluating their lives and what they're willing to take and not take, and how they're spending their time. They're not willing to work themselves exhausted, so that the leaders, the CEOs or the college presidents and VPs or whatever can, get richer while they go home and struggle to pay their bills, and on top of that feel unappreciated. That can become a very really really miserable experience. And so I think higher ed leaders today need to understand that their leadership approach has to be rooted in humanity, in caring, in possibility, and imagination. Right, that it needs to be grounded in truth telling, that we need to stop lying to people just to quiet them down or just to keep peace on campus and everything. Stop faking care and support that doesn't truly exist, and acknowledge the gaps, the ways that we need to do better in serving people, and just recognizing that the life experiences that people have, and stop treating them like they should just be happy to have a job, because investment is more than a paycheck. So, I think it's about a lot of listening, and hearing and understanding what people are going through, caring about that, hearing what matters to them. We know that new faculty are starting a career just as the image of or the idea of higher education that they may have had is changing. What they dreamed of, it's looking different. And they're anxious. So respect that truth. And I think we can work together to figure out what's needed to make it all worth it for them, to make it worthwhile for them. You're talking about return on investment. We need to sit down with our faculty and talk about that. Like, these are the challenges that we're facing, but what are some things that you can think of that you would really need that would make this worthwhile and worth dealing with? Then you have mid-career faculty, and I say all the time, it's not just mid-career, it's midlife. So they're juggling parenting and elder care and their own health issues as they age. They're still struggling financially sometimes, even with the little promotion that you get when you get tenure. So, and the job can feel like, people are kind of leaving you alone. Oh, you got tenure, great. And but then it's like you can almost feel a little isolated and neglected. Yeah, all the protections are gone, all the support that you had in early career is gone. There's nobody checking on you and helping to advise you for the next phase in your career. There's no time to really dream and think about what direction you want to go in. So I think quality of life can also be another thing, and recognizing how do we carve out resources and space and time to give faculty in their unique stages of their career, to map out and carve out, right? Do a career crafting type of thing. Because a lot of times we just wind up doing the same things because we don't have time to think about what else we really want to do. So people will feel more cared for when they have more of those types of resources. But when I think it would come to like transforming issues of promotion and evaluation. Of course, we need to look at workload equity, tenure and promotion training for all faculty who vote on tenure and promotion, to understand like inclusive practices. We really need to understand our faculty more and collect more data. But I guess at the department level, we also need to probably do more to promote our faculty. right? So raise awareness about their work. A lot of times faculty have to do this themselves. And they're not marketers. Like these are not marketing professionals, but they have to promote themselves. But they have a university behind them. I think we need to galvanize the university resources to promote the work that our faculty is doing. Because one of the things there, I think there are two things that happen when we do that. Um, Building our faculty's reputation builds our university's reputation with the public. But then it also, in a more intimate level, it builds peer awareness of that faculty member's work, because they're consuming the same type of marketing and branding, literature and information that's being put out to the public. And so now more of your peers are aware, oh, this person's work is a big deal. This person's work does matter, in ways, so they can come to the meeting already aware of those types of things. Um, and but this past practice of devaluing diverse forms of research and everything, and only lifting up certain types of research, um, it has had a direct impact on the promotion of various communities of faculty members. But I think it's an interesting time because now when we need to show our connections to the community, our benefit to the community, our relationships with the community. We need to build more of that. Those faculty members who have been doing that type of work, that public scholarship, that community connected, lifting them up and promoting that and providing resources for people to do more of that and encouraging that becomes important now more than ever. So, I think in some ways that is an opportunity for us to kind of level the playing field of how people interpret ideas of rigor and importance and everything when it comes to to scholarship.
Great. Thank you so much. You have provided some amazing perspective and input. And when you talked about, initially being rooted in humanity, that really that that overarching umbrella, really strikes a chord with so many, no matter what field you're in. That engagement and having it rooted in humanity is really key. So I want to shift to you, Kim. Thank you so much for your insight, Toby. So Kim, from a student's perspective, what helps students persist and stay engaged when civil rights protections or diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts are under threat? And sort of what role do supportive faculty programs or even community organizations play?
There are a lot of things that we can do, but just to kind of, before I sort of get into that, just to think about, this whole platform is about talking about how we support students so that they can persist and move forward. And given sort of what's been going on in terms of the attacks, on DEI and other things, is that in terms of thinking about student persistence and sort of why they stay or why they might leave higher education, we have to realize a lot of times many students who end up leaving higher education, it's not because they don't have the academic chops, that they don't have the competence for that. It's usually like non-academic challenges that they're dealing with, right? For example, um, financial strain. And for so many students, a lot of them are working jobs, 30 hours a week, 20 hours a week to support themselves. And they may not only be supporting themselves, they might be supporting families, like children, parents, and so forth. They're dealing with health issues, and that includes mental health issues, for example, right? They might be dealing with harassment, or they feel like the curriculum doesn't reflect their experiences, or they're dealing with hostile faculty members or what have you. Um, there are many things that they're dealing with, right? There are family responsibilities and caregiving activities. We tend to forget that they're also human beings and we're dealing with a whole person. And that we got to also realize you can't really have a great educational experience if all other parts of your life is not being supported and recognized and all those issues that you're dealing with, right? that education is connected to housing issues. If you're like, going sleeping, I had students who were semi-homeless where they literally are sleeping on their friends' couches. Like they'll spend a few weeks with one friend and another. It's very difficult to do your work if you don't have a permanent place where you can sit and study and do your papers, do your assignments and things like that. We've had students who've been kicked out of their homes because they come out as queer or trans. And they're trying to deal with not only finding a place to stay, but also supporting themselves and paying for their education. Because I've had students say their parents basically said they're not going to support their education because they're queer or trans, right? So they're having to deal with those experiences as well. And so that's why it's important as a university or as universities that we have these programs in place that we call DEI programs, where we might have funding for different programs like economic assistance responses, right? So I know at our university, I know other universities where they have emergency funds for students who might be struggling financially. And so you get these like quick grants to pay your rent, to help pay for other expenses that you need to kind of keep you going and keeping in your school, having food banks. And we know that's not enough because the government should be stepping in for these things, but we know we also have a responsibility to do things like that. Have a responsibility for having mentoring programs. And this is where the faculty come in, where we can come and have those supportive ear because I know as a faculty member here at SDSU for 20 years, I've had many a student come into my office talking about their struggles and sort of why they're falling behind on the assignments. And so as me, as a mentor, sort of first of all, figuring out ways that I can do accommodations for them in terms of flexible deadlines, not only just having a sympathetic ear, but also helping them think through what's going on and how to deal with it, hooking them up with resources here on campus, whether it's counseling resources, whether it's for mental health issues or other kinds of issues, hooking them up to support systems outside of campus. So that's where the outside community organizations are important, that they can provide certain kinds of support services, whether it is in terms of violence, because I've also had students who have had to deal with intimate violence in their homes, where they might need to um, deal with the legal system, which I think a lot of people are hesitant to, particularly those of us of communities of color, but trying to figure out ways of dealing with that and having like an advocate work with them as they're um, navigating the legal system in terms of violence. Um, this is why we have to have things like the ADA, so like students with disabilities can have those accommodations met for them so they can have an equal footing and be able to get through their educational experience. There's a lot that we can do. And also in terms of the administrations of universities, pushing back against um, federal policymakers, state policymakers, where they're implementing laws or suggesting policies where they are infringing on our ability to provide the best education for our students, right? And that can be tricky to do, particularly if you or one of the universities that are being targeted. I mean, let's be frank. There are several universities in California, across the US, that have been targeted for federal investigations because of the work that we do, because we have certain programs that do support specific groups of students, whether we're talking about supporting queer and trans students, students of color. But we know we need to have those programs in place because those students need safer spaces to congregate, to be with each other, to talk about their struggles. I know as a student, as an undergraduate student and a graduate student, I was very grateful for having those kind of spaces. Back then in the 80s when I was in college, we had the multicultural center to go to, where they had programming, and there were people like myself who looked like me. We were talking about our experiences, particularly, as a Black student on a predominantly white campus. That was very important. But what we're seeing, and this was happening before what's going on politically with this current administration, is that funding was being shrunk for supporting centers like a women's center or an LGBTQ plus center, a Black center, and so on. And so we need to fight to keep that funding and have stable, sustainable funding for those centers because they provide a lot of support and a lot of programming for students so they can feel like they belong, but also help them navigate the system because particularly if you are a first generation college student, you don't know how to navigate the university, right? No one tells you, certain things that you should do or like certain kinds of expectations there are when it comes to your performance or how you engage with people, how you navigate spaces. I mean, I've had students where I've actually told them, yes, you can go talk to your professor about this. And I would say, go talk to your professor about this. Let them know what's going on so they don't think that somehow you just fallen off the face of the earth and just don't care, but you need that support. You have a right to ask for certain kinds of support if you're dealing with certain kinds of issues, right? Um, there should be peer-to-peer mentoring, so, programs where other students are also helping out other students and they talk to each other and figure out how to navigate these systems. The student organization groups form and having space for them to have those kinds of groups, and then not have threats of them being dismantled, because for some people consider them to be um, forms of racism or whatever. The whole drill. They talk about the whole reverse discrimination that gets thrown out there politically when it comes to supporting marginalized students, marginalized groups of people. So there is a lot out there that we can do, and it's important to have those laws in place. Many people who came before me, and I always thank my ancestors who came before me, and I tell my students in this particular, because I teach a law and policy class, in particular, actually two kinds, one at the graduate level and one at the undergraduate level. Well, I tell them the reason why most of us are here in this classroom or on this university is because people who came before us, who fought for those rights, who fought for civil rights. And they didn't just fight for civil rights just for Black folks. We don't realize the Civil Rights Act, it might have started out talking about the rights for African Americans, but it laid the foundation for all other groups who started fighting for their rights, whether we're talking about from the Latinx community, whether we're talking about queer and trans movements, women's rights. And so those are important. And those have been important for putting together the programs that we have now on campuses across the country to support those groups of people so that we can stay and maintain and thrive and hopefully be successful after the fact, after we graduate with our degrees.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kim. I mean, I feel like you've lifted up so many key points, that really address the issues around, helping students to persist, helping them to engage, what programs, are there to support them, the role that the community organizations can play, and also just sort of how campuses can take certain steps to, reduce the harm and really increase the ability for those students who have been historically excluded, whether they're LGBTQ and plus or women of color, et cetera, can continue to thrive. I think that's really, really important. And, institutions really do need to treat advocacy as an advocate and how, that will really strengthen the campus community as a whole. So I want to thank both of you for your excellent perspectives that you just provided. And so at this moment, we are expecting the Department of Education to open a public comment period in response to the RISE Committee's recommendations, as we've heard, including the new definitions of graduate and professional student status that could set new borrowing caps for advanced degrees and a host of other pieces. So AUW's research has very consistently shown that women rely on student loans more, especially to pursue graduate education. So when federal loan options tighten, this becomes a direct access question, right? Who can still start, stay, and finish an advanced degree? And of course, who gets priced out? And so to make this plain for our audience and participants, this isn't only about numbers on a page. It's about whether a student can start, stay enrolled, and finish a degree without being forced into those high cost private loans, if they have to delay their completion, or if they just have to walk away. So So, Toby, from the campus side, what does that look like in real life? Can you give us a quick concrete example of how affordability pressures shape um, advising enrollment decisions or who persists, especially for women and students who actually don't have family wealth to fall back on?
My thing just decreased. Um, well, I think that um, it's really challenging. I mean, the reality is that now things like employment, campus employment, are really important. I think some of the policies around uh, housing that was mentioned earlier. I know many institutions were enrolling so many students to try to get the funding to run the university that we're bursting at the seams and don't have the capacity to house them. We don't have the human resources to support them, and the dictate or mandate for students to be able to afford off-campus housing makes it unrealistic for a lot of students. So yeah, I think there's a lot of creativity that's having to be made, as Dr. Price was saying, in collaborations with local businesses, corporations, community organizations that can do some creative types of support. I remember when I was an undergrad, I had a scholarship that was a partnership between the Urban League and Bank of America. It was Nations Bank back then, but it provided, those two organizations came together to provide the full scholarship, an internship, a paid internship every summer, those types of things or whatever. And so it was really impactful, and that wasn't funding that came from the institution. It was a partnership that the institution made with local organizations and corporations, whatever. And so we probably need to do more of that.
Thank you. So, Kim, when you think about affordability and when it gets tightened, then who gets pushed out first? Can you give us a quick sort of student-centered example that may focus on student parents or women of color or LGBTQ plus parents, students?
Well, thinking about that, it's kind of really hard to say who, I mean, there are a lot of people. I think for the most part, a lot of it has to do with who is financially struggling, who needs the financial aid to begin with, because we have to remember a lot of our students don't have parents to depend upon to provide them with that kind of support. And particularly with students at our university, a lot of our students aren't coming from sort of upper class and up backgrounds, right? Upper middle class backgrounds where they have parents who will fund the entire educational career. They have to depend upon themselves to be able to do that, right? And as I said before, it goes back to what I've said before. For some cases, many of them are forced not only because their parents may not necessarily have the financial means, but because they've been kicked out of their homes because they identify a particular way, like as queer or trans. I have had students who don't have parents at all, either because they are have passed away or they are dealing with their own health issues. So I've had students, undergraduate students, who are not only taking care of themselves, but they might be taking care of a parent or siblings. And so they have to make those choices about um, do I go to school? Or do I go to work and help support my siblings? And hopefully, with me going to support my siblings, I may not be able to help myself, but I might be able to help my siblings as I'm working. And I also have to say these new reclassifications is going to have a devastating effect to a lot of these marginalized groups, right? Because a lot of the professions that are not no longer going to be considered professions tend to be like, for example, teaching, nursing, social work tend to have high concentrations of folks who identify as women. So that's a whole class or group of folks who may miss out on having a bachelor's degree. And let's be honest, a lot of people are talking about, is it really helpful to have a bachelor's degree that maybe you can sort of have a good career without a bachelor's degree? And you're seeing a lot of people in tech sort of saying that, like, we're no longer looking at degrees, we're looking at skill sets, whatever. But the bottom line is, and the stats keep showing that people with bachelor's degree out earn people with high school diplomas. And depending upon what numbers you're looking at, is either by 60% or up to 80%. So it's still important to have that degree. And for a lot of us who are in marginalized communities, whether you're talking about women, people of color, and so forth, many of us have ended up in the middle class and have financial stability because we went to college,
Absolutely.
because we have those degrees, and particularly Black women. And we know the success rates for Black women in terms of degrees and career success, but that's across the board for those who have bachelor's degrees and up.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Kim. I think it's important that you've both lifted up so many key important issues about sort of where we are in this moment and the impact that it's having on, students and families and faculty, and how it may certainly, impact the future of higher education. And, as we wrap, and I want to thank everyone for the robust uh, information and the thoughts and the kudos in the chat as well. And as we wrap up, it's really about what can we do now, you know? After this discussion, after lifting this up, I'm sure you're left with a critical question. What can we do now to impact the future of higher education for others? And I really want each of you to just name one high impact action that could either be for institutional leaders or faculty and staff, or for an organization like AAUW or someone else mission driven in the community space to advance gender equity and student success. What is one action that we can do now to impact the future of higher education? Toby?
I was going to defer to Kim. I feel like I've spoken so much. Um, I um, I think mine would be if I had to, if I were in charge of something, like one of the biggest things I think is really transforming, centering, figuring out, doing some real deep dive on evaluating how caring our institution is. Because I think if we center the idea of caring, you're talking about there's so many different things to care about, so many different people to care about, so many different issues to care about. But how are we not being a machine, money driven, all of these types of things or whatever, but really drilling down to the ethic of care.
Great. Thanks. Kim?
Well, as a political scientist, I see everything political. And I think in this climate, it's even more important for us to be critical lobbyists, whether we're talking about the administrators, faculty members, people in the community. It is important who you vote for. It's important, at all levels, federal, state, local, who are going to support the needs of students and support DEI, because those are important issues. But I also kind of was looking at the chat, and someone made a point, which is something I've kind of also thought about as well. We need to support also 2-year degrees as well, and sort of training in trades, like electricians and plumbing, which can also provide sort of good income and so forth for folks. So there's also other strategies of thinking about sort of how do we support people in their educational journey that will sort of lead to um, stability, economic stability. But I also want to point out also, we also need to think about education not only as a stepping stone to a vocation, but it's also the development of the mind,
Yes.
and that we can be good citizens and that we could be critical thinking citizens. And we don't necessarily think more in terms of higher education, education in general. It's not just about, does it lead you to a good paying job? Also, developing your skills so you can also, as you're consuming what's going on politically in the media, that you have those skills to try to understand what is actually going on and thinking about the consequences and the implications of different kinds of actions, but also being able to hold your leaders accountable.
Mhm.
And developing those skills really helps us do that.
Absolutely. Thank you. Lifting up so many key points. And obviously we could continue this conversation for many, many more hours, but I thank you for everything that you have lifted up. I thank you for the engagement that folks have had in the chat and also the fact that we know that this is just the tip of the iceberg. This conversation and lifting up so many of these issues will hopefully inspire everyone to dig a little, to dig a little further, to dig a little deeper, and to really take a step forward. Most of us know that AUW was founded on the belief that education opens doors and that policy, funding, and advocacy determine who gets to walk through them. So, as we think about the future, we're also thinking about our role in shaping it. I want to thank both of you once again, Dr. Jenkins and Dr. Price, for sharing your valuable perspectives, your expertise, your insights, and your time with us. Our 2025 strategic plan really outlines AEW's priorities and the pathway that we are taking forward. And today, I really do invite everyone who participated with us to be a part of what that journey is going to be through 5 powerful steps. The first is join. Uh, Consider becoming a member of AAUW and align yourself with a nationwide network committed to gender equity. Together, we amplify our voices and our impact. Next, give. Support our mission by investing in programs that drive systemic change from educational funding to research and advocacy. Also, learn. Deepen your understanding with AEW's resources, our webinars like these great webinars and tools. Watch for AEW's short explainer that we're going to provide on the new loan caps and what, graduate versus professional definitions mean in practice. And also ACT. Visit our AEW Action Network at aew.org/act. Make your voice heard on campus, make your voice heard in your community and in Congress. And you can also submit a public comment during the ED comment period using AAUW's toolkit. We highly recommend that. And lastly, just share. If you're in the AAUW community and or beyond, share this conversation with your networks, from your friends to your colleagues, and forward AEW's loan cap comment toolkit we're going to ask you to forward it to at least 5 people. So more voices are on the record. We'll be sending you all a follow-up email with key takeaways, links to resources that were mentioned today, the Action Network sign-up link. And as I mentioned when we started, a recording of the session will be available on our website and on our YouTube channel. Just as we've all heard throughout the conversation and discussion, advancing equity in higher education at this pivotal moment requires more than conversation. It really demands bold collective action. I believe we are all well equipped for the task ahead. So thank you again, Dr. Jenkins and Dr. Price, and for all of you for joining us today. Please take good care. Thanks.